Good evening everyone, it's M.S.G. I hope you're doing well. And today I'm going to be reviewing the Fellhammer Siege Host Detachment for Chaos Space Marines. As mentioned previously, this is going to be very similar to the previous videos which I have done for the detachments. It's literally just going to be that, but Iron Warriors essentially. We're going to be taking a quick look at the Iron Fortitude rule, an overview of the individual enhancements and stratagems, as well as any highlights for combos, units, etc. As well as the end as well, we're also going to include strengths and weaknesses to any of the detachment as a whole, trying to encompass the whole thing. And then based on that information, we're going to be giving it a ranking out of 10 overall, just based on what I think the detachment is, on top of practical play. There is going to be a lot of information in the video, as mentioned previously. In the other ones, there's going to be a slideshow, so if you want to pause, excuse me, at any point, feel free to do so. But yeah, let's get started. So the Fellhammer Siege Host, this detachment rule is called Iron Fortitude. The most indefatigable, there we go, of the Heretic Astartes warbands possess a grim determination that matches the resilience of their superhuman physiques and formidable ceramite armor. They go to war amidst formations of demonic war machines and growling vehicles. Some even embrace the worship of the dark gods, trading their souls for supernatural protection. The rule is simple, so it's fairly straightforward. Each time a Heretic Astartes unit is targeted by a ranged attack, excluding dam units, if the strength of the ranged attack is greater than the toughness characteristic of the unit, subtract 1 from the wound roll. Pretty nice, actually. Very on brand for Iron Warriors, just resistant, or resilient rather, and spike driven. No kind of like flair or kind of complexity. If you're being shot at by something that's stronger than you are tough, you get -1 to wound, which is really, really good. You'll never get wounded on a 2, which is fantastic. You'll only get wounded on a 3, which is a 16 to 33% increase in your durability on average. Also works on your vehicles because it says Heretic Astartes. The only units it doesn't work on are damned. So, no accursed cultist, no cultist, like traitor guardsmen, etc. None of that, unfortunately, but it would be quite funny. But yeah, like having -1 to wound on your Vindicators is really nice. Predators, Venom Crawlers, even a Cornload of Skulls is also really good to have it on. No direct damage buff, unfortunately. It's primarily a defensive buff. It's more of a durability over damage detachment, this. So if that's something that you're interested in, then these guys are definitely up your alley. You'll probably enjoy them. If I was to make one small change, I would make the -1 to wound work on equal strength weaponry as well. So, for example, anything that's strength 4 shooting at your legionary should be wounding you on 5s. Anything that's T12, strength 12 would be wounding, any kind of like T12 vehicle on, 5s instead. That way, then that extra resilience goes through. You still do get the -1 to wound, so having las cannons wounding a Vindicator on a 4 is a lot better than wounding it on a 3, so there's a 16% chance increase in your durability there. But yeah, let's get on to the enhancements. So the first one we have is the Bastion Plate. A Chaos Lord model only, excluding jump pack models. Once per battle round, when a saving throw is failed for the bearer's unit, you can change the damage characteristic of the attack to 0. It costs 10 points, and I've ranked it as 6 out of 10. A slightly above average. You could push this to a 7. In all honesty, it's actually pretty useful. Like I said here, it's a great durability increase, so it's very similar to Bile Surgeon Acolyte ability. So as I'm sure people are aware, the scary or the standout unit, and that's a scary unit for your opponent to deal with at the minute, is the 10-man chosen unit with Bile leading them. For the +1 toughness, +1 strength, and the blanking damage instance. This works very, very well for the Bastion Plate on Terminators. So, for example, there's a lot of 3 damage weaponry which can shred through quite a lot of 3 wound infantry. So, Chosen, Terminators, very similar stat lines like Blade Guard, these kinds of units. Anytime that goes through, that's 1 dead model. But having the ability to just go, nope, you keep a model alive or would otherwise have been killed is fantastic. 10 points, again, it's really cheap, like very cheap. You're probably going to bring this every game. I personally would. I do think it's really, really good in terms of its value, because you're saving a Terminator unit, or model rather. Granted, it may die, but 3 dead Terminators isn't as good as 2 dead Terminators. If 3 damage weaponry goes through, you're going to want to save as many people as you can in your unit, which is, again, this literally helps you once you fail to save. which is fantastic. On top of that, you're already -1 to wound anyway. But yeah, I do really, really like this enhancement. I would probably rank it as 6, in all honesty, for practical, because it doesn't really change anything. It's just a very good defensive enhancement. It's probably not going to win you the game, but it's one of them ones where if you've got the points left over, you should bring it. But yeah, 6 or 7 out of 10. The only big weakness as well, which is why it's been brought down, is because it can only be taken by Chaos Lords. If this could be taken by Heretic Astartes, it would be a lot more practical. So, for example, on a Lord Discordant, a Master of Executions, any kind of, lieutenant style unit that could bring it would be fantastic. I think it would be a lot better that way. But yeah, like I've said here, if this is good as you'll normally be able to bring the enhancements on them as they're your workhorse units, this being your lords. However, this would mean that given the ability to blank a las cannon shot on something like a Lord Discordant, for example, when 2 shots would kill him, would be really, really nice. But again, it's just on a Chaos Lord. Next up, we have, excuse me, we have the Iron Artifice, which is 10 points. Heretic Astartes infantry model only. The bearer's weapons have the anti-vehicle 4-up and anti-fortification 4-up abilities. I've granted this a 6 out of 10, slightly above average. So one positive is that the anti-vehicle 4-up is really good into knights. So for example, you do have to get into melee, which is a big weakness, like I've mentioned here. Getting close to your opponent's not always going to happen if your opponent plays well and creates a lot of space between you and them where they're free to shoot you and it's difficult for you to get to them. That's, going to be, you're basically wasting your money. However, like I said, it is 10 points, it's cheap, you're not really going to care if you lose it, but it's also good to have just in case. The anti-fortification is literally useless, you can genuinely just ignore that in a vast majority of circumstances. Being T9 on knights, though, means your Lord and Legionaries are going to be wounding on average 4s. Because if you pop his excuse me, I've got hiccups, my apologies. If you do have the Chance for Glory ability, you do get the option to go to Strength 9, AP3 flat 3 damage, and you get +1 attack as well, which is going to be absolutely fantastic into a majority of stuff. Especially the tanks, for example, is going to be really nice. You do get the full rerolls if they're on an objective, obviously because the Legionaries are there, and you also do get the reroll of 1s if you're not, so it can help. We do have very solid anti-tank options or anti-vehicle or big thing monster, that kind of stuff. We can deal with them pretty reliably. Vindicators. The logic here is, why would I bother taking this enhancement when I can just use my vehicles to blow theirs to pieces? I would say it's definitely understated, though, in its effectiveness. So, for example, if I want to quickly, just give me a second, I will grab some dice and I'll illustrate what I mean. So, because the Master of Executions and the Chaos Lord have access to Dev Wounds, so the Chaos Lord has it on his hammer, and the Master of Executions gets it on his, his dismemberment axe. But yeah, so we do have dice here. So we're gonna. This is for the Chaos Lord. So I will just for hits. So we're Dark Pact in. We have a 1, but we've got 2 6s, so that's a sustained hit. So we've got 6 attacks overall. We're going to be wounding on 4s because obviously it's anti-vehicle 4-up, and any of these 4-ups or higher count as dev wounds. So we do get 4, so we've done 12 damage, dev wounds to a vehicle, so that's probably going to kill quite a lot of things. If we did have the re-rolls though, so I've rolled a 2 and a 3, I'm going to re-roll these just in case, and we've botched it, that's fine. So we've done a grand total of 12 damage with the Chaos Lord, and that's with his Chance for Glory ability. Next up, we're going to do the Master of Execution, so this is the same thing, hitting on 2s, with 6s exploding. We're going to re-roll that, because obviously you're going to probably have... the Master of Executions gives you re-rolls to hit if the model you're attacking has already been injured to some extent, so we'll re-roll that. And we got 6, that's pretty good. So that's 1, 2, so we've got 2 extra hits. Wounding on 4s. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've whiffed 2. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 10 damage overall. So it's probably going to be better on the Chaos Lord, simply due to the fact that the 3 damage is that little bit extra. But yeah, either way, having the ability to get 10 dev wounds on a vehicle with one guy is pretty nasty. But yeah, I'd probably bring this on the Chaos Lord, in all honesty, but I would, if I had, for example, a different enhancement on, or I attached a Master of Executions to the unit anyway, you're probably going to bring it on a Master of Executions as well, but primarily the Chaos Lord is what you want to go for. Next up is Ironbound Enmity. This is 15 points. Heretic Astartes model only. Each time the bearer makes an attack while within range of an objective marker, add 1 to the wound roll. So anytime, this works in range as well, so if the enemy at the back line is, some kind of difficult unit to kill, so for example a Chaos Spawn unit, which can be pretty difficult to shift if you've not got like dedicated firepower, having that +1 to wound is always really helpful. So this, again, the best thing for this enhancement is that it's fairly cheap still at 15 points, but the problem is it only works within range of an objective. So unless you actually charge or are on an objective anyway from range, you're not really going to get the benefit of the enhancement. The only time you get the benefit is if you are charging someone on an objective on the mid board usually, which can be nice. I mean, getting +1 to wound on the charge is very, very nice. Like I think a lot of stuff benefits a lot from that, especially our infantry. But if you're wanting to charge a unit which can take over the objective that you're on, so for example, let's say you, and which I'm going to illustrate this later on in one of the combos, if you have a unit of 10 Terminators with a Terminator Lord, and he has this enhancement, you're going to want to keep your Terminators on that objective to secure it, unless you've somehow managed to use sticky objectives. You kind of want them to hold the center of the board and keep on the board, so you don't want to run them off the board to get baited into, wide open, and then you lose the primary because you wanted the +1 to wound. It's just not really worth it in that circumstance. On paper, it's the best chassis for this would be the Lord Discordant. So, for example, you could get a Lord Discordant on the flank to take an objective in the back line, or another objective that your opponent holds because the guy moves very quickly. I think it's like 14-inch movement now. But the Lord Discordant gets lance on his chain glaive anyway, so you don't really care. You are getting +1 to wound on the charge anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It might be one of them things where if you're on the objective, if the enemy's on the objective as well, you can move within 2-3 inches of the objective whilst you're within the enemy rather. Get on the objective, get the flamethrower to +1 to wound the Bale Flamer maybe, but would you really want to pay 15 points for that? Probably not. Again, you put it on a Terminator Lord in the middle of the objective to get the most benefit from it. If you do get charged, so for example, if you get ran into by, I don't know, because there are units in 40k where they're just very, very tanky. They don't really do that much damage, but they're a pain in the arse to get rid of. For contesting objectives, for example, like Beast and Nurgle are a prime example. They're just a pain in the ass to get rid of. They don't particularly hit very hard. They're just annoying to deal with. This could help against them. Primarily the +1 to wound, meaning they're charging to you. They might kill, they might kill something, they might not. You then turn around and punch them back, and you get +1 to wound. But the problem is, if your opponent knows you have a 10-man brick of Terminators and they're trying to contest that objective, they're just going to ignore it most of the time anyway, because they're not going to choose, unless they've got severely high amounts of damage, they're not going to kill a 10-man unit of Terminators with a Lord, especially if he's got the enhancement on top of that with, blanking a damage that goes through, a damage instance that goes through to 0. Again, it's just probably not worth it. I've given it a 4 out of 10, slightly below average. You could probably put it in bad, but it's not the ability is fine. It's just the conditions a bit strange, to be honest with you. So last but not least is the Warp Tracer. This is 20 points. Heretic Astartes model only. In your shooting phase, after the bearer has shot, select one enemy unit hit by one or more of those attacks. Until the end of the phase, that enemy unit cannot have the benefit of cover. I rank this a 7 out of 10. I think this is pretty good. So I found from testing that the Lord Discordant was probably the best candidate for this enhancement. They're very quick, like I said, 14-inch move. Have access to the Hades autocannon, which is allows them to safely engage targets from 48 inches away. Or if you want to play them aggressively, you can put it on the Baleflamer. You don't really care about ignoring cover with the Baleflamer because it does it anyway. I believe it's like D6 plus 3 strength 6 shot, d6 plus 3 shots, strength 6 minus 2, 2 damage flat, ignores cover. You don't really care. The main thing is getting this on a the benefit of cover removed on a unit. So, for example, Victrix at the minute are very annoying to shift. Giving them the ability to ignore cover against that means they're saving up on A3 if it's like an AP 0, so they don't get to use Armor of Contempt because there's no, thingy, armor penetration to reduce. But yeah, you can also put this on a Sorcerer Lord, which I'm going to mention later on, and slap this enhancement on him, drop him down, and then you point at something, and pretty much anything in your army that's shooting at it gets -2 AP, effectively, because Death Hex on top of this usually counts as -2 AP in a majority of circumstances. Obviously, if your enemy's not in cover, it's kind of pointless, because you don't get the benefit of cover anyway, because there isn't any. But a majority of the time in my games, there is cover everywhere, and on a lot of the terrains in tournaments, there's going to be a lot of cover everywhere. This is probably the enhancement that you want to bring. Bringing it on a Lord Discord is probably the best way. You can keep him in the back line for turn 1, open fire on a target you might want to kill, so for example, an enemy vehicle. Having the ability to ignore cover is really, really good as well on knights, because it forces them to their 5 up. Majority of the time you'll be shooting AP3 into knights, which means that they'll usually get their 5 up invul anyway. However, AP1 and now AP2 are a lot more viable. So for example, if you're shooting AP2 into knights regularly, they would be saving on a 5 up. However, because most of the time they usually stood next to cover, they will make it AP -4. A 4 up armor save instead of a 5 up, which is a big increase in their durability. Having the ability to just go, yep, you ignore cover now, AP2 now forces you to a 5 up invul. It's just going to make that damage go through a lot easier, and you'll start noticing it. But yeah, I think the Warp Trace is a good enhancement. Next up, we have the Stratagems, so I'm going to keep this quick. Fight phase, Persistent Assailants. You pop this in the fight phase. One Heretic Astartes unit from your army that has been selected as the target, or one or more attacks this phase and has not been selected to fight. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes an attack, you can reroll the hit roll, and if your unit is below half strength, you can reroll the wound roll. I've given this a 2 out of 10. I think this is very bad. It relies on you weathering the storm of melee attacks, which is highly unlikely depending on the enemy which you've charged into. Again, it's very weird. So most of our combat units don't have access to invulnerable saves other than Lords, Terminators, and Warp Talons. If you're getting charged, you're either being tar-pitted by a unit as a distraction, so Cultists or Guardsmen just trying to bog you down and keep your move blocked, or you're getting killed outright. If a unit of 20 Guardsmen charges into your Legionaries and Lord, they're probably going to kill about 1 to 3 Legionaries on average, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. And having access to full rerolls to hit isn't really going to matter at that point. And if you're below half strength, you get plus reroll wounds and hits as well. Most of the time, you're not even going to have the attacks to get rid of it, so you're not even going to care, for the full rerolls to hit and wound. It is only one command point, but I just think this is really, really bad. I do not think I'd ever see anyone using this. It's just so weird. There's multiple ways to get rerolls to hit in melee anyway. So like Master of Executions, if you've got one in your unit, you can just, plink a wound or 2 off of the... Well, it says if a unit is below starting strength, so you could do 1 wound to a tank and get full rerolls to hit in melee against it. Obviously, a Baden gets the reroll hits anyway within 6 inches because of the War Master ability. I just think this is such a very weird thing to have. I just think this is the worst stratagem in the entire detachment. It's just really, really bad. It might be good if you get charged by something big, like Lord of Skulls, for example. If you get charged by something like a Lancer or something that you might want to kill, and you somehow survive it, being able to get full rerolls to hit in melee, or if they wound you below half HP, or half your wound count rather, you get full rerolls to hit and wound. That, again, it's very situational. and the situations where it's useful are very, very rare, to put it politely. And again, the more models you lose, the better they are in melee on paper, but overall this isn't worth it. If I have a unit of, like I mentioned earlier, 5 legionaries and a lord, and 1 or 3 legionaries die, I keep the 2 with the heavy melee weapons, and I keep the lord. Having the ability to full reroll hits and wounds into an enemy that you probably don't really... Like, if they've killed 3 legionaries max, unless your opponent massively whiffs, there's very, very unlikely that you're going to turn around and one-bang the unit. It just strikes me as really, really situational. Next up is point-blank destruction. So, shooting phase, 1 Heretic Astartes unit from your army that is within engagement range or 1 or more enemy units that has not been selected to shoot. Until the end of the phase, units' ranged weapons, excluding blast weaponry, have the pistol ability, which is okay. It's good on Havocs, so being able to shoot Havocs, auto cannons, las cannons, chain cannons into melee is nice. As normal, the best way to deal with Havocs other than just straight up killing them is to, trap them in melee. But majority of the time, if your Havocs are getting charged, there's something very wrong with that. Havocs are meant to be played as like a close fire support unit if you're running them with like chain cannons or something, where they're there to support your big unit of Terminators in the centre, and anything that moves into range of the chain cannon or the auto cannon just gets shot at, and kind of acts as like a deterrent for your opponent, which can be helpful. But obviously, you're bringing them either with their auto cannons, chain cannons, or las cannons. I usually bring them with las cannons, so they're right at the back on a building somewhere, and they will probably just shoot, tanks, for example. They're very easy to get killed with as well, because they're only T5, 2 wounds and 3 up armor with no invul save. And Havocs also get worse when they die, so if they've been charged, you're going to kill, 3 or 4 maybe, depending on what you're charging. You're probably going to kill the whole unit, but if they whiff, for example, you do get, 2 or 3 left, and at that point, you're not really going to care. The unit's pretty much useless. Big guns never tire as well, means that your vehicles can still shoot, even if they're within engagement range of an enemy unit, because it says Heretic Astartes unit, not specifically infantry. Granted, you'll still get -1 to hit, but if you're using, for example, a Vindicator, they do not benefit from this stratagem at all, because you already get to shoot from ignoring penalties within engagement range anyway, so you don't really care. Best unit to use this on, though, which is one I had to go a bit left field and think about it, is Warp Flamers, Rubik Marines. So they'll stay in combat more reliably as they've got 3 up, 5 up invul. All is dust as well on top of that. And if they're not dead, Rubik Marine Warp Flamers are very nasty because they're AP -1. So let's say you're charging to a 10-man unit, you get 3 or 4 killed. You've now got 6d6 shots coming through, as well as the Sorcerer, to contend with, essentially. And the majority of the time, strength 4 -1, 1 damage, due to the sheer number of shots, you're probably going to kill or at least severely wound whatever it is you're in combat with. So, which is why I've marked it as 3 of 4 out of 10 as bad or situational. Next up, we have Brutal Attrition. Fight phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. 1 Heretic Astartes infantry unit from your army, excluding Dam, that was selected as the target as 1 or more of the unit's attacks. Until the end of the phase, each time a melee attack is allocated to your unit, after the attacking unit has finished making its attacks, roll 1d6 to a maximum of 6d6 per attacking unit. For each 4 up, the attacking unit will suffer 1 mortal wound. So it would be great on a big unit of cultists, but obviously damned are excluded. So unit could charge your cultists, and you just pop this. You do potentially between, on average, 3 to 6 mortal wounds to something for 50 points. It's really you're not gonna care. You're gonna take a chunk out of whatever it is you're getting charged by anyway. But it only works on Heretic Astartes infantry. Out of phase damage though, because like I said, it's a very weird stratagem, because it's when your opponent has hit you, you basically immediately hit back with something nasty. So if you've shot a unit like Mephiston or an Empress Champion from range and nearly killed him, which is quite common, a lot of the times you do get Overwatch and you'll be able to shoot and do a couple of wounds to a unit. They'll charge you, and after they've made their attacks, you can deal mortals in return. So while they do get the damage through, you will be able to kill the unit without fighting back. So the way it would work is, let's say Mephiston, I don't know, is on 3 wounds, and you get 6 dice, so let's say he gets all of his attacks through. You get 6 dice, 4 ups are a mortal wound. You've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mortal wounds, 4 feel no pain. Yeah, you've took 3 wounds off him by just doing that. But obviously that's Mephiston's 4 up feel no pain. Most of the time he wouldn't get, like, you shouldn't be able to get 4 up feel no pain, but that's a different topic for another day. But yeah, having the ability to just basically go, yeah, you're taking damage now, you suck a dick, like, there. You're probably going to kill whatever it is that's running into you. I do give it a 5 out of 10 though, it's about average. It's situational primarily though because of the fact that it's not great into 2 wound or more infantry. So like if you're getting charged by, I don't know, Death Company, any kind of Space Marine style profile where it's like 2 wound, 3 wound infantry, you're not really going to care. If it's something like Eldari where they're running into you for 1 wound and they're trying to, you know, they can actually shred you, anytime you get a mortal wound off, unless they've got access to some kind of feel no pain, you're just killing one of their models off outright, which is just, again, very nasty. So the Eldar are going to be very, very careful with that. Yeah, it can also be used reactively if your opponent has very poor rolls, as it's after they've finished making their attacks, so this is a positive. If your opponent whiffs and you get charged by some chaff unit to move block you, you can do mortals after you get hit on top of being able to fight back in return, which can potentially get you kills where you wouldn't have otherwise got them. So I think this is a very underrated stratagem, in all honesty. I think it's pretty usable, but I'd say it's like a 5 out of 10. Next up we have Steadfast Determination, so this is your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. 1 Heretic Astartes unit from your army, excluding Damned, that was selected as a target. Until the end of the phase, models in your unit have a 5 up feel no pain. This is a 7 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, so it's either good or an auto include. I would say it's roughly on the edge of like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 because the majority of the time you're going to be fighting against ranged armies anyway. Given you'll probably be benefit on top of the -1 to wound, so having access to, you have the Terminator's squad, so I'll elucidate this later on, but for simple like conciseness I'll list it here. Terminator Lord with the Bastion plate, you ignore damage that goes through and make it 0. You're -1 to wound on the entire unit. You probably got cover, so you get the, you know, the +1 to your save. You get a 4 up invul anyway because you're a Terminator with 3 wounds. You get a 5 up feel no pain. So let's say, for example, I don't know, we'll do a Forge Fiend shooting into Terminator. So 3d3 shots. That's 1, 2, 3. So that's 6 shots going into Terminators. Strength 10 to toughness 5 would be 2s, but because of the -1 to wound, we do get the 3s to wound. So 6 are the dev wounds. Didn't get a single 6, so the wounded. So this is what I mean. I've got a 1 and a 2 here. The 2 would have normally gone through, but because of the -1 to wound, it hasn't. So we've got 4 that go through. AP -3, so 4 up invuls. So we've made 3, and because we've got 1 4, a 5, and a 6. Because of the Bastion plate, one of them's gone through. That would normally kill a model. The Bastion plate is going to get popped, and we're going to reduce that damage to 0. But let's say, for example, 2 of these got through. That's 3 damage each. On top of 3 go through, so we ignore 1, and we've got 6 wounds. So this is a 5 up feel no pain. So we've got 1 on 1 wound, and 1 dies. That would have killed 2 normally, but we've managed to save 1 on 1 wound, which is always helpful. For a command point, I definitely think it's worth it. Only works at range, however, it's still really good. If it worked in melee, I think this would be a bit too strong, because the 5 feel no pain for the unit is wild. Especially on a Terminator unit in melee, that would be a lot of help for the Terminators, because there's a lot of 3 damage melee out there. So the big ones I think of are, you know, Mephiston. Obviously it's D3, so it's not flat D3. It's not flat 3. Lucius, for example, as an Empress Children player, I always bring Lucius to deal with Terminators or any kind of, like, you know, is it Gravis armor, which is 3 wound infantry, like that kind of thing. He's usually really good at killing them. A 5 up feel no pain would be fantastic into something like that, because anytime you make a a 5 up feel no pain or a 6 up feel no pain, you essentially have to get them to kill the same unit twice because of the 1 wound cap. So, for example, if I roll 2, if I fail 2 wounds but I get 1, the full 3 damage from another attack has to go through, which will probably kill him, but you've essentially wasted a 3 damage attack into a guy that's nearly dead, which is exactly why this is really, really good. Obviously, if your opponent's got no range output, this is pretty bad. It's good into opponents like Emperor's Children. So, for example, Blastmasters. Blastmasters are like, I feel personally, they're tailor-made to kill Terminators because they're strength 10, so you're winning on 2s. 3s in this circumstance. -2 AP ignores cover, so you're being brought to a 4-up invul anyway. 3 damage flat. Anytime you ignore a damage instance against them 3 damages, like I mentioned earlier, you're basically keeping a guy alive. Any kind of like short range shooting lists are really, really good for it. Eradicators, for example, with Space Marines, if you just pump a shitload of shots into your opponent, having a 5-up feel no pain against D6 damage is always really good. And particularly useful into flamethrowers. So, for example, if you're moving a unit up and the opponent has some kind of, flamers in a tank, so for example, burner boys in a truck, rubric marines in a rhino, even if you've got like a plague spewer unit from a death guard army, having that 5-up feel no pain against 1 damage weaponry means you are ignoring quite a lot of damage on top of what you're already resisting anyway, which is really, really good. You can move around a lot more. But yeah, another weakness is obviously it doesn't work on damned as well, which is a pretty bum choice, but I get why they've done it. Next up is Siegecraft. Start of your opponent's charge phase. 1 Heretic Astartes unit from your army. -2 to any charge roll that targets the unit for a command point. I've given this a 10 out of 10. I think this is on top of the previous stratagem we've just discussed. I think this is the best one in congruence with the other one. This one is going to be really good into melee armies, whereas the other one is very good into ranged armies. So this Siegecraft is 10 out of 10 in my opinion. I genuinely think this is spectacularly good. Being able to reduce -2 to any charge roll can literally win you the game. So people in melee armies have strategies where they will posture and position just before that go turn. So as an Emperor's Children player, for example, I like to keep KJ, just out of reach within strike, and then when the opponent moves up to contest me, I then move in and start dealing my damage and have that go turn. It's a very fine-tuned mechanism, and I know I'm going off topic here, but trust me, it is relevant. If one of those charges, or even 2 of those charges, don't work, the entire plan is massively nerfed, and it will get ruined. Granted, there are ways, so for example, units that can ignore charge modifiers don't really give a shit about this, but they are very few and far between. Most armies do not have a way to deal with that, so like I've said here, -2 to any charge roll will literally change how your opponent has to play the game. So any kind of annoying 6-inch deep strike, so Death Shroud for example, now need to make an 8-inch charge. 9-inch rapid ingress or deep strike charges will now turn into an 11-inch charge. Genuinely game changing. So in this circumstance, you can fortify the middle of the board with a unit of Terminators and a majority of your forces, and then create kill boxes for your opponent, to kill your opponent in. So if your opponent feels like they can hide behind terrain, which is what I would do with Emperor's Children, like ruins where you can just advance through them and then charge, to avoid the shooting or charge into your unit, they'll need to be closer to the unit on the middle objective in order to reliably secure the charge, which in most circumstances will expose them to your fire support. So if I'm 7 inches away from the middle objective, and then next turn I will be like, right, okay, I will then move up bang next to you, get within 3-4 inches and then charge, I would have to consider then moving again outwards, so moving a bit closer to you, in case you do decide to use this stratagem, to make sure that I secure that charge. But because I've done that, I would then probably expose my unit to getting shot at from the rest of my army. So the Terminator unit is just going to turn and shoot you. The Vindicators are going to turn and shoot you. The rest of the team's going to, the army, is going to shoot you. You're just going to have a very, very difficult time and be kind of boxed into a position where you're not feeling comfortable, which is very thematic for Iron Warriors, having the ability to force your opponent to go where you want them or to play around you. And bearing in mind, this is reactive, so your opponent is going to know that you've got this, and they're going to play around it accordingly. They're going to either play stupidly recklessly, which then means you can take advantage of it, or they're going to play very cautiously and at a distance, which then means your army has more time to move up. I'm probably thinking a lot of people are probably going to look at this and go, "Oh, it's only -2 to charge rolls. Oh, it's not that big." Trust me, if you're up against a melee army and you know how to position your units and you provide them with adequate support in the center of the battlefield, you are going to make an opponent want to bash their head against the wall, because the amount of times they're going to whiff the charge roll or waste command points trying to re-roll it is going to be insane compared to what you will be able to do in return to them. You'll win games because of stuff like this and positioning. It's genuinely amazing how good this stratagem is. Also works on every unit in your army. If you've not been, for those keen, obviously probably noticed this. This works on cultists. It doesn't specify you cannot use it on damned units. So, for example, here you can use this on cultists in the back line. So, majority of the time, Chaos Space Marine players like myself, when I am playing Chaos Space Marines, I will just put a unit of cultists in the backboard, 10-man unit, keep them in the back objective for the rest of the game, done. I don't need to do anything else. They're just there to hold the fort, stick at the objective, and potentially screen against any kind of deep strikes. When the rest of my army moves up, sometimes I will have holes in my deployment. So, for example, a deep striker unit can come through and then, charge the 10-man cultist unit or kill them outright, and then next turn move on to the objective. The problem is, if they deep strike 6 or 9 inches away and shoot the cultist, then not only will they then need to, at the minimum, make an 8-inch charge for the 6-inch deep strike, they'll also need to count in for the fact that if they do shoot at the cultist, then they're going to make the charge bigger, because I'm just going to take away the models that's closest to their unit to make that charge distance longer. This is why it's really good. Normally, if it's a 6-inch charge, what they'll do is they'll go, "Oh, you know what, I will just roll the charge and I'm probably going to get it. It's like a 60 to 70% chance I'm going to get it." With this, it changes a 60-odd% chance to like a 30, 40% chance that it's going to go through. And if your opponent, because they're fucking clueless most of the time, shoots you, let's say we're using Death Shroud, they've got the Plague Gauntlets or whatever it is, they've got the Plague Spewers or whatever. They kill most of the cultists, you're not even in range to charge anymore. Because remember, they can declare a charge, but then you basically put -2 on it. So if they're 10 inches away, it's now a 12-inch charge. They can't, handle it. They're always going to be charging if they get 10 inches away from you, 12 inches away, because it subtracts 2 from the roll. But it's not cumulative. So, again, it's still really strong, though. So, like I said, melee armies are going to absolutely hate this. And if you've got this, for example, on a Terminator Lord in the center or a Chaos Lord, you get it for free. Because you can use their ability, which allows you to, I think it's the Lord of Chaos ability where you get it for free. Last and most certainly least is Pitiless Cannonade. Shooting phase, 1 Heretic Astartes unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot this phase. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes an attack that targets a unit below half strength, a successful unmodified hit roll of 5 up scores a critical hit, so you're basically critting on 5. So the only circumstance I can think this is good in is if you are shooting at a very big scary unit that you want to die and it's nearly dead, you've got it to about half HP or lower and you really want it to get killed. This is a way to basically secure that. Again, it works on your army too. I just think it's just really bad. It's a 2 out of 10. I do not see this being used at all. Anything below half strength the majority of the time is either completely useless and crippled beyond belief, or you're not really bothered anyway, so you can just ignore it. You're probably going to kill something that's below half strength anyway, but if you want to just, not hedge your bets and make sure you get the kill off, I suppose it can be useful, but I just think it's really bad. They need to really rework that stratagem. But yeah, let's go on to the standout units and combos. So there's only 2 pages here. So Chaos Lord with Iron Artifice. As shown earlier, Chaos Lord getting dev wounds on a 4 up against vehicles is really good. So you can do some serious damage. Like I mentioned, we did 12 damage to a whatever it is we're attacking into. So 12 wounds would nearly kill a Land Raider outright. You also get, that would probably kill a Rhino, any kind of like Sentinel, anything below 12 wounds is within kill range for a Chaos Lord majority of the time. And due to the fact that this detachment doesn't really get any play from what I've seen compared to like Renegade Raiders or Creation's Bile or Packbound Zealots, you're not really going to care. Like, your opponent's going to not really notice that you've got the ability to do that. So they're going to be like, oh, he's going to fish for 5s or 6s, where in actual fact, dev wounds on a 50-50 is really, really good because you're winning on a 4. So majority of the time, you're going to be using sustained hits, like I said earlier, instead of lethal. Yeah, it's just really, you just hit really hard into vehicles, which is always a good thing. I do think this should work against monsters as well, because it makes more sense, because people do, like, for example, Tyranids. I get why it's into vehicles, because, it's the whole CG Iron Warriors kind of thing, but I do think it would be better if they made it anti-monster as well instead of anti-fortification, because who the fuck gives a shit about anti-fortification? No one. Next up is the Lord Discordant with a Warp Tracer. Like I mentioned earlier, it's literally the best chassis for the enhancement because of the range of the autocannon. And Ignore Cover is really, really good on your entire army, because we do have some very, very nice shooting. And getting that extra, what amounts to essentially an extra AP on shooting, is just never really going to be a bad thing. It's just going to be that it can be the difference between getting a wound through, in genuine honesty. It's really, really helpful. And finally, this is what I like to call the linchpin unit. This is what I would bring in this detachment every single time. Chaos Lord in Terminator armor with a Bastion plate and 10 Terminators. So Terminators aren't as effective as what they used to be, due to the myriad of flat 3 damage weaponry that's around. However, in this detachment, Terminators in particular, in my opinion at least, are incredibly good. So the unit has access to -1 to wound, because it's only T5. On average, so the majority of the shooting is going to be winning you on 4s or 5s majority of the time. Decent shooting with access to dev wounds with Reaper auto cannons, so you can have the combi weapons on top of that. The Reaper auto cannons are just there. I have got a lot of kills and plinked off a lot of wounds on things that I shouldn't have done with the auto cannon thanks to the dev wounds. And obviously it's a 10-man unit of Terminators. They're going to have incredibly good melee, especially because it's Chaos Space Marines on top of that. The Lord also provides them with the ability to change your fail save to 0 damage, access to 1 command point stratagems for free, so the 5-up feel no pain against shooting, -2 inches to incoming charges on melee. You can be reactive with what you choose, and you also get a very durable profile on him as well. He is quite tough to shift, meaning he gets to half, he's 2-up, it's T5, 6 wounds. Again, I'm remembering this from memory, so I do apologise if it's slightly wrong. T5, 6 wounds, 2-up armour, 4-up invul, half incoming damage, and obviously if he's got the enhancement, you can just blank damage that comes through once, which is really good. You can either run these onto the mid-board via Deep Strike or Rapid Ingress, keep them on the centre objective to act as what's called an anvil unit, which your opponent has to deal with or stay away from. You can deny your opponent the mid-board, so being able to be in the middle of the board allows you to reliably react to things, so you don't need to worry about the centre. You can just focus on the left or the right and put whatever you need in there. So the way I would do it is I'd have the Terminators in the centre, deep strike them, get that secure board first and second turn, bring the tanks around up on the sight lines, and then obviously cover fire while the rest of my army holds the fort, and then you use a Lord Discordant or something quick like a legionary unit to filter through the ruins, or the Lord Discordant just skitters around and then hits people from behind when they're least expecting it. The only issue obviously that I can think of is against a good player, you're going to struggle because they know how to deal with Terminators. I know how to counter Terminators. You most of the time just avoid them. Especially if it's a 10-man unit, you want to get away from them. And obviously this unit is incredibly expensive. But if I know my opponent is just going to be sat in the middle of the board, unless I have some serious firepower or serious melee threat that I'm going to have to dedicate to killing him on the middle of the objective in no man's land, I'm probably just going to go, you know what, do what you want, I'm not going to waste my time. And they're also very easy to kite because, again, they are only 5-inch move and they do not have access to advance and charge. Next up, we do have Chaos Predators, Rhinos, and Vindicators. So the Chaos Predators and Vindicators with access to -1 to wound from range allows you to position more aggressively. You'll more than often win the shooting trades with las cannon units. So if you do have it's maybe a bit more pronounced on the Destructors than it is on the Annihilator, because I know if it was a duel from Annihilator to Annihilator, the twin linked from the twin las cannon, the main gun on the Annihilator, you can kind of supersede the roll. So let's say I'm shooting at him, I've rolled a 3, I would be wounding on a 4. Let me re-roll that, and I've got a 6. So yeah, sometimes having the ability to re-roll wounds against them from range can kind of counter it, but if you rolled again and then you got like a 3, you don't get the wound on the big damage cannon, whereas if I was shooting into someone else without that rule, I would then wound them, which is really, really good. Rhinos also getting access to -1 to wound from range is really, really nice. So, you know, you're wounding las cannons into the Rhino on 4s, stacking it with smoke as well, so having -1 to hit, -1 to wound. And also +1 to your save as well, if I'm not mistaken. Smoke also gives you +1 to your save. I might be misremembering that, so do please correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, Chaos Sorcerer with Terminator Sorcerer, sorry, with Warp Tracer. Like I mentioned earlier, just deep strike him nearby a unit you want dead. Point at the unit with Death Hex. There's like an 80% chance it's going to go off. You've now got Ignores Cover and increased AP by 1 into everything from range and in melee. But you don't really care about covering melee anyway because you ignore it anyway from your entire army. So this is going to be good into Victrix Honor Guard, so it forces them to use their Armour of Contempt. So if you shoot in AP -3 from a Vindicator, for example, into a unit of Victrix Honor Guard, they now have to pop Armour of Contempt, otherwise they're going to be saving on a 6 instead of a 5. Because they ignore cover, so you ignore cover, so that brings them up to to 3 up save instead of a 2 up. Your AP -3, which will then bring them to AP 6 up for their armor save. You then force them to use Armor of Contempt, because they're going to probably use Armor of Contempt. They are -1 to wound, but, you know, majority of the time doesn't really care. You then force them back to a 6 up or a 5 up based on the Armor of Contempt, and obviously the D6 damage from the Vindicator, you're probably going to kill quite a lot of them. So we'll do that actually for a moment. So let's say there's a 6-man unit of Victrix Honor Guard, so it's D6 +3. It's also +1 because it's blast, so D6 +4. 4, so we've got 8 shots going into Victrix. So it's AP. We'll say that the sorcerer's done that. So it's normally AP 3. They've popped Armor of Contempt, so it's AP 2. But we ignore cover, so it's 5 up. So we're hitting on 3s, exploding 6s. That's pretty good. So that's 1, 2, 3. So we've only missed 1, which is good. Wounding on 2s, but it's -1 to wound because obviously they've been led by a character probably. 3s. So that is 1, 2, 3. So we've got 6 wounds that go through. AP -3 because ignore cover and increased AP. So they would be saving on 5s. So that's 1 that goes through. The rest are damage, so it's D6 damage each. So that's 1 dead, 2 dead, 3 dead, 4 dead. So we've killed 4 Victrix Honor Guard. With the so it's 5. So we've got a 5 which kills 1 outright, 4 which kills 1 outright, another 4 which kills 1 outright, and 2 3s. So it would be on 1 wound, but the 3 from the other one kills it. So yeah, we've just killed 5 Victrix Honor Guard in 1 turn of shooting, which would otherwise have not happened. You've pretty much crippled that unit because of that, which I think is really, really helpful. And last but not least, for honourable mentions, we do have the bikers. A lot of people, I always have a soft spot for bikers. I really like them. I think they're incredibly cheap. So 70 points, really good stat line, very weird base size, which is actually quite good for blocking, you know, potentially move blocking people because it's oval. So it's like you cover a lot more surface area. T5, 3 wounds, 3 up armor, -1 to wound against range damage, which is primarily what's going to be killing him. And then obviously you get +1 to your strength when you're charging because of the new biker rule. You can get these guys reliably where you need to be, and then, you know, smack into something and do a pretty decent amount of damage because they've got chain swords, melter guns, power fist on the champion. I would definitely include a unit of 3. So we'll quickly run through the strengths and weaknesses. So the strengths, -1 to wound on most of our army is a solid and potentially game-winning buff. Given our army ranges between T4 and T10, a majority of weaponry which will go against is more than likely to proc the -1 to wound. Heavy bolters, wounded infantry on 4s. Las cannons and similar profiles, wounded our vehicles on 4s or 5s or 3s at the very least. If it's free, well, most of the time it's going to be 4s because very rare are you going to get a weapon that's like what, strength 20. This means that your opponent will be forced to overcommit their shooting into a lot of circumstances than they'd be comfortable with. So if they're wanting to kill the unit, they're going to have to focus most of their army into shooting whatever it is that they're needing to kill. So, which is good because obviously if they're shooting more into something, then you're basically saving your other units from getting shot at because they're not focused on the other units. They're focused on that one that they need to kill. It's very good if you're into defensive play style. So I'd say a majority of the time in 40k you want to be proactive. So defensive armies on average tend to be worse than sheer damage armies. However, this attachment, if it's piloted by a very good player who knows what they're doing and plays into the strength of like the defensive play style, area denial, kill boxes, other legit tactics like that, then this detachment can become quite scary because it's going to feel like your opponent is constantly fighting an uphill battle, depending on what you're up against, obviously. And the detachment is better against ranged armies. So when the meta is ranged, so when Knights and Guard were very, very strong, and I think Guard at the minute are going to be very strong with the new Mordian rules that they brought out. I think the -1 to wound, like I said here, Guard, Knights, Tau, etc., it's just going to be very relevant, and it will show that. I think it's going to be quite good. I think Fellhammer Siege Host is actually going to be very good into that. But the weaknesses, we do have lackluster damage compared to the other detachments. Like I said, this is CSM in general, thankfully, are actually quite high damage. They're not like fuck you level of damage. They're very, very balanced, in my opinion. So most of the time, damage is usually preferred over durability, as armies with a focus on damage tend to shred through a lot of durable armies in general. But durability doesn't mean anything if the unit dies slightly slower than average. Again, not having that damage output compared to, like, I don't know, Renegade Raiders, Creation of the Bile, Packbound, etc. They're the most popular and the most competitively viable because of the damage that they deal. Detachment support could be better. So, like I said, it's a shame that a majority of this detachment stratagem support isn't particularly outstanding. I understand it's meant to be defense oriented. However, I would personally rework a few stratagems that would be thematic and make them more viable. So I would replace Pitiless Cannonade with an Armour of Contempt stratagem. So this plays into the defensive nature of the Iron Warriors and adds protection in melee. And depending on what's shooting at you, is potentially better than the 5-up Feel No Pain against shooting. So for example, if you're in melee, you can proc the Armour of Contempt. If you're from range, you can pop the 5-up Feel No Pain. You get to choose which one you want. I would probably say it's better for melee. Obviously, you also get the -2 to your charge roll, but sometimes that's not really going to be relevant. It's going to be relevant in a lot of circumstances, but if your opponent's like 1 inch away from you, then it's not really going to be, relevant. Armour of Contempt would probably be better. Detachment rule only works against range damage, so like I said, we don't have any kind of ways to mitigate any kind of wounding in melee. It's primarily from range. We're very good into range damage, but we're very, very bad into melee, which can be, game-changingly bad, unfortunately. And there are ways around the detachment rule. So, for example, lethal hits, dev wounds, it'll cut through you, +1 to wound on shooting, that can nullify the rule as well. So here's a list. So if you want to pause at this particular bit, you're more than welcome to. I'll briefly run through it because I don't want this video to go over an hour. So we've got a Chaos Lord with a Plasma Pistol, Demon Hammer, and the Iron Artifice, which is the anti-vehicle and fortification on a 4-up. Chaos Lord in Terminator armor with a Chain Fist, Combi Bolter, and a Bastion plate. Cypher, because he's like auto-include in my opinion, is really, really good. Lord Discordant on a Hellstalker, so that's going to be with the Warp Tracer enhancement. Battle line, we do have a cultist mob. Like I said, we always bring a unit of cultists with us every game. Legionaries for the 5-man, the standard loadout. We're just going to bring it with the Chaos Lord as the attach. We're going to bring a Rhino because we want to make sure we get the Legionaries and Lord where they need to be. And obviously the Rhino itself can then, retreat, move, block, etc. Do actions on another objective, depending on what it is. For the other data sheets, we have 2 units of Predator Destructors with the auto cannon, 2 las cannons, and the rest of the attachments, so combi bolters, havoc launchers, etc. 2 Chaos Vindicators with havoc launchers, and obviously they've got the the big demolisher cannon. We've got a squad of 10 Chaos Terminators with 2 Chain Fists, 6 combi bolters. You could switch them for combi weapons, it genuinely doesn't matter. 2 paired of curse weapons, 6 power fists, and 2 Reaper auto cannons. They're going to be our anvil unit. That's the main unit we're going to be building around. A unit of Chaos Bikers, as I mentioned, I would bring a unit of 6 here for 70. I can't get my words out. A unit of 3 for 70 points. So they come with the power fist, Astartes chain swords, 2 combi bolters and 2 combi melter guns. Sorry, just melter guns, not combi melters. And allied units. We've gone for a bit off kilter here. We're going to bring 2 squads of Rubric Marines. So they're going to have access to the Wart Flamers. One of them's going to have the Soul Reaper cannon for that extra, I think it's strength 5 minus 1 damage. I'm not too sure. I haven't really played Thousand Suns. You could bring a big unit of 10 as like a Wart Flamer thing, but again, having access to Rubric Marine Flamers for defensive play styles especially is really good, because if you bring a squad of rubrics next to a unit of terminators, or you keep a squad of rubrics on one of the side objectives in no man's land, any kind of opponent that charges nearby you get to shoot them with Overwatch. That's a lot of flamers going into them. That's a lot of damage. Your opponent is going to be a bit worried about it. Overall, where would I rank it? It's either a 5 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10. Into melee armies, I'd probably say it's like a 5 out of 10. Into ranged, it's a 7 out of 10, so I'd rank it as good. It's an A overall for me. I do like this detachment. It's very matchup dependent. Although I do think it's a sleeper hit, and it's actually quite viable. When I was doing the research for this video, I do think that this is actually a very well balanced detachment that could do with a couple of tweaks, but overall, I think they've hit the nail on the head for that defensive, slow-moving, siege style play, which the Iron Warriors are perfectly accustomed to. That's very, very thematic. I just think the changes I'd give is I'd get rid of Pitiless cannonade and replace it with Armour of Contempt, or an equivalent to that, and make it so the detachment rule works against equal strength weaponry as well as weaponry that's stronger than you are tough. So again, that would be nice. Alternatively, you could give Pitiless cannonade to grant friendly Heretic Astartes units crits on 5s when shooting, so your cannons and all that are going to be focused more on, you're getting exploding 5s and, sustained hits from shooting. Your Terminators aren't really going to care about that, but your vehicles are, so your Vindicators, Predators, yeah, that kind of thing. I think that makes more sense because you're constantly pelting people with firepower, which is exactly what I think the Siege Masters of the Iron Warriors would do. But yeah, overall, I'm a massive fan of this detachment. I really, really like it. It's just out of the I don't think it's competitive. I think it's great in casual games. I think it just needs a couple of tweaks for it to be a lot better. And then once them tweaks are made, this would genuinely be considered one of the better ones. But again, at the minute, like I said, the top 3, Renegade Raiders, Creations of Bile, Packbound Zealots, and Veterans of the Long War are a sleeper hit as well. But I think this could be up there if given the right treatment. But yeah, to summarise, I want to thank you all for listening again. I appreciate your patience in me bringing out the video. Like I do said, I am very, very busy because it is Christmas. I'm unsure if I will be making another video anytime soon. It depends, because the next one I will be making, because I want to start off the new year with a bang, I want to do Renegade Raiders. So I'm thinking if I can do, because I know Renegade Raiders won the poll, and obviously I want to give you guys what you want. I think I want to do Renegade Raiders as the first detachment review of 2026, so I might just take a long time to work on that. That failing, if I do get the motivation to crank out another video within the next 2 weeks, I will probably do either Nightmare Hunt or Chaos Cults, because I'm a big fan of the Chaos Cults one. I do really, really like it, because I'm a big fan of the Cultists in general. But yeah, I love making videos for you guys, and I appreciate the fact that you've spent your time listening, even if you've been watching it or if you've just been listening in. Please feel free to subscribe if you feel my videos are up to your standards. Your patronage is always appreciated. And regardless, I hope you all have happy holidays wherever it is you are in the world. I hope you, your family, and yourselves are all safe. And always remember, wherever you are, praise the dark gods. Cheers, guys.